So in the last lesson, we discussed about the network security group, which can be applied at the subnet level. Now in this lesson, I will try to understand a concept of called as an peering. Now, so we have virtual networks within the Azure account. So we can have multiple virtual networks. So within the virtual networks, we have subnets, as we discussed. Now, by default, the subnets within the network can communicate with each other. So by default, one virtual network cannot communicate with another virtual network. So we have, let's say we have two virtual networks created in the different regions, or could be the same region, could be the same subscription, or could be the different subscription. By default, the virtual networks cannot communicate with each other. So by default, the virtual networks cannot communicate with each other. Either the virtual network, which we called as a vnet, when it can be in the same subscription or a different subscription, or could be within the same region or a different region. Still, they cannot communicate with each other, or the vnets in a different tenant also in Azure. So by default, the vnets cannot communicate with each other. Either they are in the same region or a different region, or a same subscription or a different subscription within the same account, or they are part of a different account in Azure also. By default, they cannot communicate with each other. It means that the resources could be virtual machines, could be app services, could be some kind of a database servers or something, whatever we talk about it, they cannot communicate with each other. Only the subnets within the virtual network can communicate with each other as a default. But for some reasons, the virtual machines or the resources residing in one virtual network need to communicate with another virtual network within the same account or region, or could be different region, or could be a different Azure tenant. Then how can we establish a communication? Okay, there are two different kind of scenarios which we can take it as an. One is a case one, what we can call it as an, maybe the two virtual networks, the two vnets are in the same Azure account. Maybe in the same region or a different region, or maybe in the different subscription. But both the target and the source vnets, or basically the two vnets, are in the same Azure account. This is one business case where we would need to establish a communication between the two vnets within the same Azure account. A second case could be where could be the two vnets, can basically are in this a different Azure account. So now the two virtual networks are not in the same Azure account. So as they are part of two different Azure accounts, so by default, they are part of two different subscriptions. Either they can be in the same region, either in the a same region or a different region. Different region. So in this kind of situations, what options we have available to establish a communication? Now, network peering establishes a simple connectivity between the two virtual networks in Azure. Either these two, the vnets can be in the same Azure account and same subscription or a different subscription or a same region or a different region. So the network peering is basically a simple establishing a connectivity between the two vnets within the Azure. So the vnets can be on a different Azure accounts, but in the same region or a different region. So this network peering will basically establish a communication and will automatically establishes the routing information in the backend. So we don't need to explicitly define the route or anything. It's a simple way of connecting the two virtual networks in Azure. In case of a case one, we don't need any kind of an additional privileges or anything. We can simply establish a peering between the two virtual networks. Now, in this case, so let's say if I have within the same subscription, within the same account. So I'm taking this as the same account. Now two virtual networks within the same account. Could be same region or a different region. It doesn't make any sense. It makes a difference. Now it's called as the Azure account. Now within the Azure account, we have two different virtual networks. So I would say called as vnet 1, vnet 2. So vnet 1, I'm calling it as 172.16.0.0/16 is the vnet 1. There should not be any kind of overlap of addresses when we establish a peering. If the target and the source VNets are having the same IP series, then we cannot do a peering. So the IP address series should not be a conflict. So I'm taking a VNet 2 as basically an 172.17.0.0/16. Now within this, you might have a subnet. A subnet 1, I'm saying subnet 1, 172.16.0.0/24, and subnet 2, you have 172.16.1.0/24. And within the VNet 2, you have 17.0, 17.1.0 subnets. Now, by default, the resources within this subnet cannot communicate with this resources, and these cannot communicate with this one because they are two different virtual networks. So in order to establish a communication between these two, so we establish something called as an appearing. Now this is what we called as a concept of appearing. So I'm going to the Azure account. So I have the account called as this one, and the directory is if I go to the directory, I would see called as a directory called as Bollam V Ramnavan. So what I'm trying to do here is that I'm going to so I have two subscriptions under this one, development. So I'm going to create a virtual network. So under a development, I'm creating two virtual networks. Let me create a new one. So I'm saying RG- called as something a VMs. Virtual network name, I'm giving it vnet1 when the South India review and create. Let me change this 172.16.0.0/16. I am creating two subnets. Separate purpose, the name as 1/24. Add it. I'm creating one more subnet. So I'm giving it subnet 2 1.0/24. So now I've created two subnets within this particular one virtual network. I'm just creating. So we have this vnet one created. Let me initiate a virtual machines under this vnet. So I'm giving it VM1 under subnet 1 hyphen, I would say called vnet 1, just for region South India, Windows Server 2 CPUs with 8 GB RAM. I'm giving so I'm selecting a network vnet 1 subnet 1. I don't, yeah, let me give a public IP, no problem. Basic security group and review and create. Let me create one more machine. I'm going to VM2 hyphen subnet 2 hyphen vnet 1. So I'm selecting a subnet to. Rest all I'm saying review and create. So what I did here now, I created one virtual machine over here and there's subnet, that is VM1. And we created one more virtual machine connected to this subnet. So as these two virtual machines are in the same virtual network, but part of different subnets. So by default, the communication between the subnets within the same virtual network is allowed by default. I'm creating this. Now let me go to the virtual networks. So I'm creating one more virtual network. I'm selecting an AFIL, another subscription. I'm creating an RG-VM test. I'm giving vnet 2. So I'm giving it 172.17.0.0/16. I'm adding subnets. Subnet 1. I'm adding subnet 2 under the vnet 2. Okay. Now let me create two more machines under this one. This we call it as a VM3. This we'll call it as a VM4. Now I'm going to the virtual machines. VM3, subnet 1, vnet 2. So I'm selecting vnet 2, subnet 1. I'm giving it VM4, subnet 2, vnet 2. So I'm selecting subnet 2, review and create. Create. Now we created four virtual machines and two different vnets, and each vnet two subnets. Now first let's try to see the communication between VM1 and VM2. Then we'll try to see the communication from VM1 to VM3. So I'm going to the first VM. VM1, subnet 1, let me take the public IP. Let me go to the second VM. Let me take the public IP. This is the first VM. Let me go to the first VM. Disable the firewall settings. So I just powered off the Windows firewall. On this machine also. Let me disable the firewall. I opened the command prompt. I'm saying ipconfig. Now this IP address is 107.16.1.4. Now the IP address of this machine is 1.4. And other machine is 0.4. So they are part of same virtual network, but different subnets. Different subnets. So I'm trying to ping from here to here. Dot 16.1.4. So I'm able to see a communication from other machine 172.16.0.4. I'm trying to ping. So I see a communication. Now, as these two machines are part of the same virtual network, even though they're part of different subnets, by default, there is a communication between this one. Now let's log into these machines. Third machine. So the IP address of this machine is 1.4 and the IP address of this machine is 0.4. Now I'm trying to communicate between these two VMs. Sorry, 17.1.4 and ping 172.17.0.4. So now we have a communication between these two VMs. These two VMs are able to communicate, these two VMs are able to communicate. But this VM1 cannot communicate VM3 and VM4. So from 16.0.4, I'll try to ping 17.0.4. So I see 17.16.0.4. So from here, I'm trying to ping 172.17.0.4. So from this machine, I'm trying to ping this machine. We see that there is no communication. Now I'm trying to ping another machine 1.4. There is no communication. As we can see, from this machine, I try to ping this machine, same, but they will not be able to communicate. So from 17.0.4, I'm trying to ping 0.4. I see there is no communication. Now this VM is not able to reach these VMs, and this VMs is not able to reach. So basically the resources in this VNet cannot communicate with these resources and this is. Now, how do we establish a communication between these two VNets? Now that's where we called as a peering concept. Now let's go to the Azure. Let's go to the virtual networks. So I'm going to the VNet 1, the first virtual network. So in the virtual networks down, we will be able to see called as a peerings. Now add a peering. So it can establish a communication between both the virtual networks. The name of the peering, I'm giving it as vnet2 peering. And remote on the other VNet, what will be the name? I'm giving VNet1. So here, the name of the peering, this one I'm giving it as a VNet2. The name of the peering here, I'm giving it as a VNet1. Now I'm selecting here subscription. The target VNet was in the same subscription or a different subscription. In our case, it is in a different subscription. What is the virtual network? VNet2. So now what I'm selecting here now. So from this VNet, I'm trying to establish a peering with VNet2, which is there in a different subscription. So now I'm adding it. Now we can see there is a VNet2 connected. Now let's go to the VNet2 and see the peering status over here. Now we can see there is a peering got added. I mean, shows a connection called as in status called as in connected. Now the peering has been established between these two VNets. So by default, automatically in the background, the Azure will route the traffic between these two VNets. So we cannot establish a peering between the VNets if they are using the same IP series or there is an overlap with the IP address. So we need to ensure that the IP addresses which are being used in the source and target VNets are not the same or there is no conflict. Now I'll try to ping from VM1 to VM3 and VM4. So I'm going to this VM. Now we can see earlier there was a packets got dropped. Now we can see there is a communication. Now I'm doing it to 0.4. I'm able to communicate. Now I go to this machine. From here, I'm trying to ping the other three machines. So we can see 0.4. We are able to get the communication now. Now, by establishing a peering, so we are able to establish a communication between the two virtual networks. Now let's take a case 2, which is in two vnets are in a different Azure account, either in the same region or a different region. Now I'm just taking this diagram, but I'll take this as an one Azure account, and this is another Azure account. This is another Azure account. So this Azure account, I'm calling it as an Ballam V. Ramana. And this Azure account, I'm calling it as an some acute learn. Now I'll call this VNet as 18.0, and we'll call this as VM5, or we can call it as in VM5 and VM6, and this will be the 18.0, and this will be the 18.1.0, and the IP address of this one will be 18.0.4 and 18.1.4. Now here, the VNets are in the two different Azure accounts. It means their directories are different, billings are different, subscriptions are different completely, because the account itself is a different now. Now we want to establish a communication as the source and target are in the same Azure environment. Okay, so in this case, the source and destination are the same Azure region itself. If they are in a different, basically if the VNet 1 is in Azure, VNet 2 is on premises, then we cannot do a peering. The peering works only within the Azure environment. Now in this case, what happens now? The user account of Azure account, Vallam V. Ramana are different, and acute line user accounts are different. The users of this will not have permissions on this Azure account. The permissions of this one will not have permissions of this one. So we need to, how do we establish a peering? So in this kind of case also, we can establish a peering between this one. Now, the user in this directory. So basically the user in this directory, or we can call it as an Azure account should have permissions on the target account or directory subscription as a network contributor. Similarly, the user in this particular directory or account should have permissions on the target account or directory subscription as a network contributor. Now the user of this one should have permissions here. The user of this one should have permissions over here before we establish a peering. Now in our case, now this is one Azure account, which we see called as a directory as called as a Bollam V Ramana 1. Let me take this easy purpose. Now this one. Now there is a user. I'm going to the user accounts. Let me go to the another tenant before that. Now this is my another tenant, which you can see. So Venkat LAN 276 is my another tenant. Is my another tenant. Now there is a user in this tenant. Let's go to the users. So I have a user called as a Rohit. Now there is a user account called as a Rohit. Let's assume that he's basically a network administrator who is trying to establish this one. And we have a user in another tenant, which is called as an so it could be a network administrator. Now this user is responsible establishing a peering, and this user is responsible for establishing peering. Now this user should have permissions on this vnet as a network contributor on this subscription. And this particular user should have permissions on this vnet as a network contributor. Now let me do one thing now. Before that, I just need to add this user into this account as a guest. I need to add this user into this account as a guest so that I can assign the permissions. Now let me first go to this one. So I'm going to the users. I'm creating an external user. So on this tenant, I'm adding Rohit user account as a guest user. I'm saying Rohit. Review and invite. So I'm just inviting the Rohit user into this AD user. Now let me go to the into the here. Yes, sir. So now one email will get generated from Microsoft. Now we see that there is one email which has been received. Not a spam. So now it says accept the invitation. So I added the user Rohit as an external user into this Azure account. So Microsoft would send out an email to this user saying that you have been added to this Active Directory account. Kindly accept it. Now I'm trying to accept that invitation. It's giving organization directory, accept invitation. Accept it. Now it means that you are part of this Azure. You have a permissions on that Azure account. Now similarly, I'm going to add the Ramana user into this one. Okay, before that, let me give permissions to Rohit into the account. I'm going to the this one. So I added, now let me refresh. I can see that Rohit is being added as a guest user. Now let me go to the vnet. So I go to this vnet, which is vnet 1. I'm going to access control, role assignment, add a role assignment, network contributor. I'm adding as a network contributor, Rohit. So I added permissions on this vnet as a network contributor to Rohit. Similarly, now I need to add this user account in Azure account. Then I need to provide permissions on this Azure account. Now let me go to this one. Now I'm creating an external user. I'm creating a user. Invite it. Let me go to this. Yeah. Now we see there is a mail received. Microsoft. I'm just saying I accept the invitation. So I'm logging with this account. Accept it. So now what we did here in this one, so we added this user into this Azure account. So it has sent out an email, and this user has basically accepted that invite. Now we need to provide permissions on this vnet. Now let me go to the virtual networks. Okay, there's no virtual network created. Let's create a virtual network. So I'm creating under a Venkat Ramana subscription. Create a new rg-test vnet 3. I'm selecting South India. IP addresses. I'm giving 172.18.0.0. I'm giving subnet 1. I'll create one subnet. Create. Now we are going to add this user or provide permissions to the user as a network contributor on this particular vnet. So that's the step what we are going to do. Now if the virtual network got created, access control, role assignments, you can say add role. Network contributor. So I'm selecting Ramana and assign permissions. So we have assigned permissions. So we have added the users into cross tenants, and we have assigned network contributor role on the specific vnets. Let me create one virtual machine in this particular for a testing purpose. So I'm selecting vnet 3, subnet 1. Mm, mm. So we have this VM got created. Let me go to this VM. Access control. Sorry. Let's go to this VM. Let's access this VM. Let me disable the firewall. So from here, I'm trying to ping 172.16.0.4. As of now, there is no peering. So from this VM, I'm trying to ping this VM. From here, I'm trying to ping this VM. So I'm in the mission 0.4. So from here, I'm trying to ping 172.18.0.4 continuous ping. So as there is no peering established or a communication between these two VNets, so as of now, they are not able to communicate with each other. Now let's establish. Now to establish that, take the resource ID of this VNet. So in order to do that, let's go to this VNet. So I'm going to this VNet, that is VNet 5, that is VNet 3. Go to the properties of this one. So you see a resource ID. Get this resource ID. So I'm going to this VNet 1, going to the pairings. I'm adding a pairing. Pairing name, I'm giving it VNet 3. I'm giving it VNet 1. So here you see, I know my resource ID. Specify the resource ID. Now down, it'll ask you the directory. So you should have permissions on this one. So I don't have permissions on this one because the permissions are given to this user called as an Rohit @ basically for Ramana user as permissions. Okay. So this user which I logged in doesn't have permissions on this VNet. So let me sign out. Log in with. I'm going to the virtual networks, VNet 1, peerings. So I'm adding a peering. I'm giving VNet 3, VNet 1. I know my resource ID. So specify that. Now it will try to authenticate. Now we are trying to configure a peering between this and this using this user. Now we have given permissions for this user on this account or a VNet, and it's basically network contributor. So first we need to authenticate. So I'm saying authenticate, which is that this is the directory authenticate. Now click on add. Okay. Now we would see there is a status called as an initiated. Status as initiated, still it is not connected. Now let me go to this particular VNet. So I log in with user account called as in Rohit. So from here, we need to establish a peering over here. So we need to add a peering here. Let me refresh this one. Now let me go to this one. So I'm signing out with this user. I'm going to log in with Rohit. So I'm going to the virtual networks, vnet 3, under the peerings. So we don't see a peering yet because we have to add it. Now we need to take this vnet resource ID. I'm taking the resource ID of this vnet. I'm giving it vnet 1, vnet 1. I'm giving it vnet 3. I know my resource ID. Enter it. Now I need to authenticate. So this vnet is available in volume V directory. Authenticate. I'm authenticating this user. Add it. Now the moment we add it, we see a status called as a connected at both sides. Now let's go to here, vnet 1 in the peerings. Now we see status is connected. Now in this case, we have to log into both the tenants and both of them should be able to basically add these ones. Okay, so this user should have permissions on this vnet, and this user should have permissions on this vnet as a network contributor or owner. Then they can basically add it. Now a peering has been established between these two vnets which are there in the different Azure account. Now what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to test the communication from this VM to this VM. Now we can see the moment we added the peering, it started communicating it. And from this VM, we can see the communication got started. We can see that 18.0.4 is able to ping, 16.0.4 is able to ping. Now this way, you can establish a communication between the Azure virtual networks, which are in the same Azure account or a different Azure account. Okay. Right. Right. In the next lesson, we'll try to understand the Azure DNS.